Hi everyone, this is my first episode doing interviews to people that I consider important or special in my life. And I don't even have a name for these episodes, but we're going to talk about adaptability. And the person here is Andre Barreto. He is an engineer, entrepreneur, financial controller, and he lives now in Netherlands. He lived in the US, he lived in Germany, he lived in Brazil. He was born in Brazil. So I wanted to speak about the adaptability with him because he's one of the persons that I know that has this ability. So I introduce you to Andre, who I consider my spiritual brother. Hello. Hi, Andre. How are you doing?
Hello, Juan. Good. It's great to be here with you.
Thank you. Thank you for being here. So let's start. What is your definition of adaptability?
It's a good question. I think is being there for whatever happens, and most importantly, to go with the flow of things, and instead of trying to resist what happens. Maybe that's the way I would define adaptability.
What tools do you use to adapt to a situation? Yeah.
I would say that some of the tools are natural to me, and some I had to learn. The ones that are natural to me is that I'm very curious. I have always been. Some friends sometimes say that the inner child inside me is ever active, so I'm still a child. So when things happen, I'm always curious to understand why and what can I learn from that. So being curious is one of the tools. So I'm always learning. The other one is being an optimist. This is maybe the most important tool because when things change, sometimes the natural reaction is say, "Oh, shoot! Now there's something new. What am I going to do?" So I believe the human being is prone to think negatively, but somehow my brain is wired in a way that I'm usually optimistic. When there's a change, my first reaction is to think, wow, that's nice. There will be something new out there. So being curious and thinking positively helped me a lot. Those are things that are natural to me. But then some things I had to learn on the fly throughout my life. I had so many changes, like you said, lived in so many countries. And I would say that the first thing that I had to learn was to find the answers inside me. And that came through meditation. And one example I give is when I was like right after my school, university, I was doing a trainee program. And I was living, the company assigned me to one place in Belgium, and it was a nice apartment, but it was underground. And basically, I was away from family and friends and so on. And out of a sudden, although it was Belgium, there was a power outage. And so and it was raining. So there was no light, no internet, and I was inside a place, had no car to go anywhere, raining a lot outside. So what I try to think is, okay, what am I going to do? It's a night. Then I had two options. One, it would be sleeping, but it was kind of 7 p.m. Or other option would be, okay, let me try to meditate. And that was a turning point in my life because I started meditating and it was a wonderful experience. And then I said, wow, I don't need anything else than meditation to be completely at peace. So I kept this as a tool for since then, more than 20 years now. That whenever there is change, I keep remembering that what is really important to me, I can find inside me and not outside. And this is a little bit different. I usually say that I'm a fake Brazilian because when you ask someone, a Brazilian who is out of Brazil, but what do you miss the most? The typical answer is, oh, I miss the beaches, I miss the weather, and so on. And so when there is change, if we look for the things that we had in the past, this becomes a challenge because we will keep looking at what and or focusing on what we don't have. While when we carry everything that we really care inside us, whatever happens, you're certain that you will not need anything else. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, for sure. And also for those who don't know, Andre's a meditation instructor, as me. We met in this heartfulness practice. So that's how we know each other. About what are the challenges that you have found during this adaptation process?
I guess the biggest thing that I had to learn, and it was quite painful, especially in my professional life, has been to be in flow with what I'm doing and where I am. Because, for example, at work, since I'm very curious and creative, I'm always trying to come up with new solutions, and this is part of change. So I'm usually trying to drive change. But one thing that it was very hard for me is to observe when the change that is coming from me is going to be in flow with what is surrounding myself. So, and the image that came to me recently was like a drop of water that starts on top of a mountain and is going down a small stream and then flowing into a small river. So the point is that when the water is going down the mountain, there are so many twists and turns. And nature is very wise. Nature finds the most efficient way, because of gravity, that to bring the drop of water all the way from the top of the mountain all the way to the sea. And if we were those drops of water, we try to set the course. So instead of being in flow with what happens, when there's a turn, no, I want to go straight. So this thing about trying to control too much has been a big challenge for me. And only recently I started to, although I like change, I have always tried to control a little bit change. And the challenge now, and I would say the recent lesson learned is there's a good quote that I take with me all the time, which is do your work and step back. This is from Tao Te Ching. And this is something that I admired, this quote, but only recently I was able to put it in practice. When I started my company and there were so many changes that happened, I had to really keep working and see what would be the outcome, and some of that outcome was not under my control. So that was the big challenge for me, is to be in the flow, do my work, and see whatever happens from that.
So when you speak about the challenges, I also relate to it because I am from Ecuador and lived in Venezuela for 14 years. And I remember the first challenge that I had was this stage of negation where you are into a new reality and you don't want to see it in an optimistic way. I mean, it was my case. And I don't know, it lasted for some time until I was able to see it in a different way, in a more optimistic way. And then, of course, there are other stages um, that you go through. I wanted to ask you if you went through this stage of denial, or are there times that are difficult that you don't want to um, accept, or is just natural for you to adapt and say, okay, let's do it?
Yeah, in my case, it's interesting because my initial reaction, one could say that it's slightly different than most of people, because my initial reaction is positive. Maybe there are lots of people like me. So I don't enter that denial because I'm happy with change. I like change. So I'm initially optimistic. But then I believe the denial that you described, I had a lot in my life. And I would say that even if it's the initial one, or if it comes after some time, maybe it's related to attachment, right? So we are attached to what we used to do, or and in my case, it's usually related to my attachment to my ideas. So in the case when I move to a new country, I'm very happy initially because I'm learning new ways and so on. But then when I enter into this new culture, I start to see that maybe there are some things which are not 100% aligned with what I think is right or wrong and so on. So that attachment to my own ideas of how things should be maybe is similar to what you're describing as a denial that I deny that new reality, and maybe that's the way I feel about those are the challenges that I face in that case.
As an engineer, do you have a process like, I know you like to structure things, because I know you, and do you have like steps that you go through, or you just go with the flow?
Yeah, this is something you may call me bipolar or something. I'm a mix of an artist and of an engineer.
Yeah, I know.
So, but in terms of process, what I tend to do is, for me, prioritization is very important. So usually during change, we get overwhelmed with, like, for example, when you have a new job, or when I started a new company, or when you move to a new country. Usually, there are so many things to do, right? So let's take moving to a new country. There's so much bureaucracy. There's so much. There's the language, right? Even if you initially speak English, or when you start learning the language of the place where you are, you get tired. Your brain is exhausted. So in my case, what helps a lot is to always keep a list of to do, and wake up in the morning. And then after my meditation, I tend to first project what is going to happen during my day. And I tend to organize things in terms of priority. And I always keep a paper list also. So, and then that way I switch back and forth between like going through my list inside my head, but also making sure that I keep note of the small things that I may forget. So keeping to-do lists and prioritization is part of the process I use. Let me see. Yeah, I think that's the first thing that comes to me.
Well, you mentioned meditation. What are the benefits here? Because you mentioned that if you want to have answers, you look inside yourself. So meditation is a way of looking inside yourself. But my question is that the only thing that you get out from meditation in this case?
Well, in general, there are so many things that I get from meditation, but I would say that within this topic of change, I would say that the biggest thing that comes to me is the reduction of noise. So the regulation of the mind. And when we are going through change, there are so many things that we need to remember. There are so many challenges, and we tend to get overwhelmed. And with meditation, basically we reduce the level of noise, and then we bring our system into a state where we can really find the answers inside. And the answers are not coming through impulses, but they are coming from who we really are. So this regulation of mind, and also bringing us to this clear state where there's less noise, really helps a lot. That's one of the benefits. But if you could mention so many that also help going through changes, meditation helps us sleeping better. And we know the importance of sleep. And when we recharge our batteries, the day flows much better. So there are so many, and I would say, at least for me, the most important, like I mentioned in the beginning, is that meditation reminds me that my north, where I'm going, is not out there, it is inside. So for me, that certainty, and we humans, we like having a little bit of certainty. So I don't feel fear, because I know that everything I need is inside me. So there's nothing missing out there because it's already inside, and meditation helps me find. So this is something that we haven't talked, which is the fear. And in my case, I'm also wired in a way that I have never felt much fear. I was a daredevil as a child, and that I keep being a daredevil as an adult, but meditation helped me in that way that whenever I feel a little bit anxious, I close my eyes and then I go inside, and that anxiety goes away because I go and I focus on what really matters, which is inside.
Interesting. You mentioned fear, and I remember that I went from Quito, which is a city that you could say it's a calmer city than Caracas. And then in Caracas, the robbery and violence, yeah, it's huge. I mean, for me, the first years, it was very difficult to adapt to a city that has this in big numbers. So I remember when I started meditation, it was I was living in Venezuela for 2 years, and then I started meditating. And the funny thing is that my reality started to change, because I was not being robbed as I was in the beginning. I was not so afraid of going out to the streets. And I think that you're able to, when you meditate, you're able to take better decisions, and and have a very different quality of life, which is very important in this sense. So I remember this change between not meditating and meditating so strong, that was like being robbed and not being robbed. Of course, I was robbed while meditating, but I don't know. There were like 2 times that I was robbed, but before that, it was like I don't know. Something I had to do. I go to the streets. I am robbed, and then I give my money. I give my cell phone. That's normal. After that, I don't know what happened. It changed my reality. So in terms of fear, I think it was very important, because I was not feeling this fear and going out into the streets and 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 saying to the thief, like, rob me, I have fear, because fear is something that attracts these type of things. So funny that you mentioned, because this is something that I haven't haven't thought about it, but is very important. Are there
Yeah.
stages during this process? I think you go through stages, or is just the decision that you make and you do it?
You mean going through change?
Yeah, I mean, like it's maybe the same question as the process, but when I say stages, is something more like emotional, uh, an emotional thing that happens to you when you go through this adaptability process. Because, for example, in my case, I was feeling denial, then I was feeling like, okay, I could do it. I was feeling more secure. And then the third one was to act. And then I started acting, and okay, I need to adapt to this situation. I can't keep living like this, because it's nonsense. So, as you mentioned, fear, do you have other emotions that go through this process, or is it only fear and courage?
Yeah, in my case, I would say that I start with positive feelings and thoughts because I love new things. So I start with those positive thoughts. Then I would say that in my case comes less fear, but like I said, comes more like resistance, in a sense that I enter a phase where, oh, but this is not right, this is right. So I enter this resistance phase, and then comes, I would say, a third phase, which is really adapting, which is accepting the things which for me sound like not ideal, and then being in tune with that new situation or a new space. So there's like positive, then resistance, and maybe a little bit, in my case, it's not fear, but it's more about like judgmental. And then the third phase would be forgetting the judgmental part and just accepting the place or situation where it is. Maybe this is the process that I go through.
So my next question is, how do you communicate it to your family? How do you tell them, okay, we have to move? Now the reality that you had is not anymore there.
Yeah, that's a good one. And then this depends on who you're talking to, right?
Yeah.
I remember there is a funny story with my mother because we were, my wife, she comes from a different country, and then we met in India, so lots of changes there. So I came back from India, and then a few months after India, I invited my mom for lunch. And I was going to tell her, look, I'm going to Europe now to propose to this woman. And so on. And the funny part was that before I told her that, the waitress was coming, and then she said, "Could you give me a wine?" And then when I said, "I'm going to Europe and I'm going to propose," she said, "Please vodka." So that was an interesting case of like telling to someone who really feels, because mothers, as you know, so I after so many changes, like I've learned like how to communicate things to people who know me for a long time, like my mother, my brothers and sisters, and so on. They already know me, so when I come with change, they say, "Oh yeah, this is Andre. One more change. He's a citizen of the world, and so on." But this is different than talking, for example, to my kids. Right now, we are about to move again, and what we try to do is avoid unnecessarily to bring too much too early. So when we communicate to our kids, they're 8 years old, 8 and 6. So first we share that, oh, there will be some news, this is going to be very good. And then we are slowly sharing with them that there will be a change of house, there will be a change of school, and so on. So this is something that it depends on who I'm talking to. So it's completely different talking to grown-ups and the small kids. We try to give them some time to digest.
How do they react to this? I mean, is it easy for them or not?
This is something that we are learning on the fly. We have moved with kids from Brazil to US, then from US to the Netherlands, and now we're going to move again. And our kids, they were raised in this environment. At home, for example, no wonder we started a company that sells flexible furniture, because we are always changing the environment. So our rooms, the living room and everything, it's always changing. So we keep changing layouts and everything. So they are used to change, but we are noticing that even if there is an initial hype, they are still learning to adapt. So this is something that more and more we're paying attention. What's outside, and sometimes the change can bring smiles outside, but inside can sometimes there are some anxiety and some fear that it is manifested in ways that we don't even imagine. And then we say, only after the fact we realize that, oh, maybe this is related to change. So, and the more they grow, the more we are cautious about adding more and more change to their lives, because they need to have some stability, they need to have some roots. So we hope that for now, very soon we settle down more to give a little bit more respect to their own time to create their roots.
So for those who don't know, Andre started a company named Pablo, which is basically, can you explain it in a more efficient way than me?
Well, I will tell the story very in a short way. So basically, we moved to US, and it was a cold place, Michigan, and we were entering our first winter, and our kids have lots of energy. How are we gonna keep them inside during the harsh winter with lots of snow outside? And then it became a winter project to create a fort. And because of this, knowing the kids, we would know that they would be bored after some time if I would build just like a fort. So I decided to create a modular fort, and this fort would be reconfigured from fort to an airplane, from an airplane to a spaceship, and that way they would always renew their playground, let's call it. So the fort became an engineering challenge for me. Then that became a patent, and we saw the potential not only to use those blocks as modular playground, but also as a furniture. So now Pablo commercializes blocks. Some people would say that they look like Lego, life-sized Lego. And as an example, one block can be a cube of 40 by 40 by 40 centimeters. And you can stack them and you can make shelves, or you can take them out of the stack and create like a side table. So this is Pablo, is a flexible product that adapts with you as your life changes. Does it give a glimpse of what is Pablo?
Yeah, I guess if people want to know more about it, they can visit your website. What is it?
Is fablo.studio, www.fablo.studio. Fablo.
So how do you balance these changes and the stability? How do you do it?
That's a very important topic, and this is something that I'm still learning. I believe that because of this curiosity, when I graduated from college, I was not seeking balance. I was seeking experience, and so for me, I had no need for stability, and that when the years started to pass, then more and more I felt, okay, now it's time to settle down. But life kept, and maybe something inside me kept pushing to new changes. But more and more now, and I guess, like I said, the kids and having a family, and also I believe that we change a lot until we find the peace inside, and that peace inside starts to also manifest outside. And now the stability for me is coming where I found a place where I can feel the peace inside, and also when I go outside, I still also have that peace outside. So I believe that balance for me has come, that I don't feel now much need to change. Of course, some changes come through life. For example, now I will start a new professional endeavor, and this was beyond my choice. It was part of adapting to what was needed. Um, and but then the stability comes when I don't need to look for something new, and I'm pretty much happy with what I have. And then I guess we don't, consciously or unconsciously, we don't try to change things again and again and again, because now we found that inner peace, and nothing to look outside different. So the short answer is that the balance took some time for me to start developing this balance. And for many years, there was too much change. Luckily, it had no big impact on my health or on my well-being. But with time, life calls for more stability.
What are the pros about adapting yourself to any situation?
Well, I would say the biggest pro is not reacting, because the opposite of adaptability is reacting. And for me, it feels that reaction usually is a waste of energy. And most of the time, when I reacted, also, there is some kind of even we feel in our bodies, right? So our muscles get tense, and even the entire system somehow gets a little bit out of balance when we react. So I would say that this is the biggest pro, is when you're in tune, the entire system works better and in a more efficient way. When we react, we tend to spend so much energy trying to fight something which is changing, and that energy could be used to move us forward, and we get stuck. So we spend energy to be stuck, which is, I would say, that's the opposite of that advantage that I was talking about.
So I was thinking about simplicity, and maybe sometimes simplicity is associated with poverty, for example. And when I look at your example, you've been living in Brazil for many years. You had your house there, then you went to the US, you had your house there. Now you went to Netherlands. Do you think simplicity is is a very important thing to have when you go into this process of adaptability.
Absolutely. If I had kept like a big luggage, let's call it a big luggage with me, life would have been very, very hard. So yes, when we moved to US, we found a very nice house, and if I had set that as a standard, that from now on I will only live in a house like that, then my life would be hell, because when there is change, even and you can say, oh, but simplicity is not only about money, in the sense that, oh, I will be simple and I will spend little. Of course, I try to do that also. But I would say that simplicity is also about having little, how can I say, less expectations on how things should be. So one person can say, oh, I'm very simple, but I will only live on a tent. And I would say that that's not that simple, because if you move to the middle of a big city like Manhattan, or if you move to any big city in the world, if you want to live on the tent, that's not so simple, right? So yes, I would say that simplicity is very, very important, and this has helped us a lot. For example, we moved from US, where we needed cars to go everywhere. And then in the Netherlands, we didn't have a car for the first year. So for 1 year, we were living, just riding bikes everywhere. So I would say that this simplicity coupled with adaptability is very important, that being simple in a way that not needing much, but also in a way that not expecting much.
What have you learned from adaptability?
I believe the biggest lesson is that sometimes I felt that I was adapting, but inside me I still had some expectations. And because for me, like I said, it's natural for me to adapt and to find new things. But sometimes I thought that I was adapting, but inside me there were still some small resistances, still some expectations. So what I've learned is maybe two things. First is that sometimes I don't adapt as well as I think I'm adapting, and that shows later when I look back and I say, oh, actually I was reacting a little bit to this, I was reacting a little bit to that. So this is the first one. And I believe the second one is about that sometimes I try to drive changes that are not necessary. So after adapting so many times to so many new realities, the question is this new change something which is driven by a need, or is a change that is being driven by a wish, a want? So this is really something that I'm now paying attention more and more, to make my decisions and adapt only when there's a need, and not because now I want to do something different.
So if you could give an advice to people that are having a hard time adapting to this new situation with this, in this pandemic situation, what would you advise?
I would say that there's always an upside. Sometimes it's hard to look at the positive side of things, but we know that there is. So if it's not natural, should this person try to develop this positive, looking at the positive side of everything, because we can always learn, right? Because when we don't learn, we are not evolving. So if people want to have things the way they always are, it means that they are not going to evolve. So maybe this is a way to start thinking positively, that if you are having a hard time with change, the question is, do you want to be like a stone and not evolve? So this could be a trigger for looking at the learning side of change, even if it hurts, right? Just remember that if we are on the comfort zone, there will be no evolution. If there's no evolution, what's the use of like being the same again and again and again? I believe that we are born to evolve. We were babies, and now we keep growing and learning new things and so on. So I think that this is the first hint. Be optimistic and positive thinking, remembering that we are all evolving. The second one I would say is remember to be efficient. And the best way to be efficient is to be using our time in a way that is aligned with what we need instead of what we want. So focusing on the needs, and also to be in flow with whatever we are going through. So the more resistance we have, the more waste of energy we're gonna have. So if we focus on the needs, usually things flow very well.
Cool. I think it's everything that we covered now, and I don't know. You have any other thoughts about it?
The only thing that comes to me is that I'm by far I'm not an expert. I have gone through lots of change, but I'm still learning. So I look forward to interacting with lots of people to also learn new ways of adapting. So I'm sure that lots of people who could be listening to this might have other approaches to change. So it's always nice to learn from them also.
Yeah. Cool. Thanks a lot. Thanks for your time, and see you soon. Let's finish.